All right, so the second really big question kind of gets, it's a follow-up on that. I mean, these are all sort of related, that nature-nurture thing. And I'm going to give you kind of the two big counter positions. Is there a question? So the nature-nurture debate can be thought of as arguments that concern whether our psychological characteristics are biologically innate, so are they DNA hardwired, or are they acquired through education, experience, or culture? That's really what the question comes down to. And I'll give you a moment to write all that down. Would it be helpful if I moved it around while you were trying to write? All right, you got it? So I'm going to contrast probably the two most important, the most clear voices on opposite sides of this debate. And I'm going to start with John Watson, who is the father of behaviorism. And we'll talk more about that later, but that's who this is. And what Watson had to say, he was very much a blank slater. He said that everything you do is the product of your experiences, and what's more, if he can control your experiences, he can shape you any way he wants. Kind of a bold statement. Watson also thinks you don't have a mind, or thought you didn't have a mind. If you couldn't observe the process, it didn't exist, and he said you couldn't observe mental processes. Therefore, no mental processes. No mental processes, no mind. Here's an absolutely famous quote by John B. Watson. He says, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well-formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I will guarantee to take any one at random and train him to become any kind of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggar and thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and the race of his ancestors." That's a claim right there, isn't it? What do you think? Is that true? Could you do that? I heard a no. Who says no? Who's bold enough to say no to the father of behaviorism? Who says yes? I got one yes. Why do you say yes? Two yeses. Why?
Well, I think from experience, you've learned a lot of things. I'm agreeing with both. I'm the devil advocate kind of girl. I'll believe both sides. I think, yes, you can do that because if you are strictly put on something, you have no option, no mind of your own to decide that, then you will do it. Just like if you have a military parent who's really, really strict, they'll curfew every night at 9 o'clock. You have to make sure your bed is made every day before you go to work. It's going to be like that pretty much for the rest of your life if you have that person around. If you don't have the person around, I think the person you are will come out. I think it's both sides.
I love the back row because you guys, as soon as I look back, everybody looks. Don't look at me. He's going to call on me. Show weakness. It's like blood in the water. I'll be calling on you all semester. Who else? What do you think about this claim by Watson? Does it make sense to you? How about somebody over here? Are you lonely over there? The only lady in this entire column? You're okay with it? Okay. What do you think?
I think
Where do you think the want to comes from? Anybody want to field that? Where does the want to? It's being exposed to it, right? So, I mean, particularly in the Watsonian view, right, you would have to be exposed to something before you could imagine it.
If he had, like he said in that quote, that he could have his own controlled environment and specifically expose individuals to something, if you haven't been presented a different view of something, then you may think that is what you want to do, because you never had a greater desire to do other things that you were not aware existed.
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting, and if it gets too repulsive feeling, wait to see what comes next. In fairness, though, I have to say I'm playing kind of a little Fox News here in my quote picking, because there's a great line that follows this where he says, now I can't prove this, I don't have evidence of this, but neither does the opposing view. So he's responding to the blank slate folks. But, I mean, this is essentially what he thought. He thought that things like intelligence were ideas that we came up that had no real basis. So that's Watson, father of behaviorism. We're going to have a lot to say about that school of thought. Oh, what do I have hidden here? Okay. So Sir Francis Galton, one of those limeys. He's Darwin's cousin. I can't imagine what lunch at their table would have been like, because Darwin's family was just a crazy bunch of, I mean, well, they were not crazy, but like smart crazy. His grandfather, Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus, I love that name. That's the only reason I even would consider having a kid, is just to name one Erasmus. It'd be really bad if it was a girl. But Erasmus had developed his own idea of evolution a good half century before Darwin did. And so you've got Darwin coming up with evolution, a pretty important idea. Well, actually natural selection, not evolution. And then you have cousin Sir Francis Galton. This guy single-handedly develops the field of statistics. Correlations did not exist. I mean, things we think about all the time. Correlations didn't exist before him, frequencies, none of that crap. The only way that we had to judge information on what seemed to be true to us. There was none of this counting and comparing one group against the other. And so Galton, super bright guy, in one of the first psychological experiments ever, you got to love this, decided to check. He had a simple idea. It was a very elegant idea. Does intercessory prayer work? So if you pray for somebody to get better or to live forever, or whatever you're going to pray for, does that make a difference? Turns out that's a hypothesis. You can test it. And what Galton observed was that there were a lot of people praying for the king's and queen's health, and they do this in all countries where they have kings and queens died about the same rate of everybody else. So he said, nope, intercessory prayer doesn't work. Kind of an interesting idea. So he does this. He also becomes very interested in the idea of genius. Genius. What is genius? Does it have a biological basis? Does it run in families? Or is it something else? So using the best tools of the day, he did kind of a cluster analysis. He listed all the geniuses he could think of, and then did family relations. Were they brothers, cousins, uncles, grandsons, grandmothers, granddaughters, all this kind of things. What he found was that the geniuses he was able to come up with were related to one another. So it seems like a pretty good argument for inheritance of genius, whatever genius is. Who's going to go, yeah, it makes sense? That makes sense to anybody? You're a suspicious bunch. Because I know some of you are going, yeah, I'll buy it. Yeah, it sort of makes sense. Good for you. Unfortunately, there's a problem. What's the problem?
How are they related?
No, not how are they related. Well, I mean, the relationships. I mean, yeah, so you get a causal problem, but there's a fundamental problem in his logic. What does he not account for? I can't hear you. Oh. Okay. Other genes being what? Okay. So let's think about it like this. Let's say, what's your name again? Apple? Like the fruit apple? Okay. Because my hearing's not great and things get mushed up in my head and I hear all kinds of entertaining things that didn't happen. Apple here is a genius. And you may not know this, but this is her sister, and she's also a genius. Besides being geniuses, what do they share? How they were raised. They also share economic status. They probably went to pretty good schools. All the geniuses that turn out in Galton's time are upper class. Right? So if you're working at the factory or the coal mine just trying to stay alive, you're not doing a lot of genius stuff in your day off, if you have one. You're not getting the education that the ruling class, if you will, the educated class had. So there was a lot of differences there. Oops, I should have pulled this down already. Studied greatness. Now, Galton was, again, he was a genius, and he was smart enough to know there was a problem. He advocates using twin studies where possible. And this is one of the most elegant solutions in all of science, in my opinion, ever. We use this today. When we want to study, are traits innate or are they acquired through the environment, the go-to standard is a twin study. So if you think about it, nothing could be more elegant. If I have identical twins, that's a bit of a misnomer, by the way. Identical twins do not have absolutely identical DNA, but they have really, really close DNA. Genetics are going to be the same. So if I have a group of twins who are raised together, I can see, do they both develop the same trait? For example, schizophrenia is something we study a lot. About 1% of the population gets it, and you can imagine how few twins are, but it's kind of hard to do these studies. But if we want to know, is schizophrenic something that's caused environmentally, or is it genetic? Is it destiny? Twins. If one has schizophrenia, what are the chances that the other has schizophrenia? We'll talk about this later. Or, so suppose they're raised together and they have that. Now we want a pair of twins where at least one has schizophrenia that were raised apart. And we can look at things like fraternal twins who are raised in the same pre-embryonic environment. The prenatal environment's all the same, raised probably in similar conditions growing up, but also maybe split. It's a beautifully elegant solution to this question. Galton came up with this. So to his credit, that's something he came up with. Unfortunately, starting with the best of intentions, his thoughts took us down some bad roads. He formed the field and coined the term eugenics. And eugenics is kind of the human equivalent to what a farmer does. And what do I mean by that? Well, a farmer will have some livestock, right? And maybe you're raising cattle and you want to raise some prime beef. Some members of your herd are going to be better specimens for that purpose than others. Make sense? So what do you do with your better specimens? Yeah, well, you don't breed them, hopefully, but yeah. You breed them together, and you get more of the better specimens. So the idea is you're going to breed for improvement in the herd. In fact, the opening of the way Darwin explains evolution to everybody is natural selection is by going by guided selection, which is what we're talking about now. So the idea here in eugenics is improving human stock. This is occurring just prior to World War I. Also occurring about this time is we're starting to get the sense of intelligence testing. And in fact, there's a World Fair, I think between World War I and World War II, I can't remember exactly which, in England where the big thing was go to the tent and get your family fitness tested. Should you be having kids or not? Where this thought goes eventually is some people are fit to be procreating, to be having children, and some people are not. And it gets really out of hand in Nazi Germany, where you have a lot of forced sterilization going on. And if I can get it to select, this is a flyer from the time. And I had a student from Germany last fall who translated this for me. It essentially says, why are we carrying the weight of all these people on our shoulders? They're holding us back. And this was widely distributed in Germany prior to World War II. Pretty scary stuff. But I wouldn't get too cocky because the same thinking was going on in the United States at the same time. And in fact, we had for years and years and years sterilization laws on the books in many states. And I want to say it was the mid-'70s when the last of the sterilization laws came off the books. So what that meant was if there was a judge and a doctor who decided you should be forcibly sterilized so you don't have kids, guess what? It could and did happen. So cautionary tale here is we want to make sure we're very careful with science and we want to make sure our thinking is good. A lot of the thought that went into eugenics, once it kind of went out into the politics, was not good science. It turned out who was the inferior, who was the ones who needed to be sterilized, minorities, people we didn't like much, people we didn't agree with. It turns out that superior always looks a lot like us.